Another reason that grass may be clogging your mower is that the blade or blades may be blunt or damaged. For instance, if it's blunt and it's not putting a clean chop on the grass, instead it would probably be pushing and bending the grass as it turns. And there would be pieces of untidy, severed grass, instead of, as I've said, nice, cleanly chopped pieces. And it's those nice, cleanly chopped pieces that we are actually looking for to get caught up in that nice airflow going through to the grass box. And perhaps the worst thing about blunt blades is that it won't be able to chop through the grass nice and fast and maintain its high speed of rotation. Because trying to get through a whole mass of grass with a blunt edge will slow that blade down. And we've got to remember that it's the shape and the speed of the blade that creates that high level of vacuum up through the deck and that airflow to the grass box. So if the blade slows down, all of that is going to be reduced. So it's a double whammy. It won't cleanly chop a sufficient amount of grass, and it won't produce the amount of vacuum and airflow to put that grass efficiently into the grass collector. And so there's going to be some grass left around and some clogging. So always make sure that the blades are nicely sharpened and balanced, and that there's no damage to the edges of the blade that could prevent it moving through the grass at the right speed. One of the main culprits for blunting and damaging blades is unwittingly hitting stones hidden in the long grass, and having the deck set so low that the blade is chopping into the earth. Mowing uneven ground, even if it's not too much every now and then, collectively it can blunten and damage the blade. So if you're mowing uneven ground, it's best to raise the deck slightly to keep the blade away from the earth. And also take a good look around the grass before you mow to make sure there's no hidden stones. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is something I did a video on quite recently, and that is mowing wet grass. Now, collecting the grass is all well and good in ideal dry conditions, but when the grass has water droplets attached to it, even quite a small amount of dew, as I've mentioned, these droplets cause the chopped off pieces of grass to clump together and also stick to the underside of the mower. And we've got to remember that the very essence of grass collecting means that we need to move this grass to put it in the grass collector, and so it's no good at all being stuck to the deck. So we need as little amount of wet grass as possible to prevent any clumping, because one of their favourite places for clumping is indeed in the chute that goes to the grass box. It blocks off that vital flow of air going through the mower to the grass collector, and with the grass being wet, it's going to lie flatter than it would do if it was dry anyway. On top of this extra flattened grass, it's highly likely that we'll have less of the lifting pressure because the air no longer has a clear run right through past the blades to the grass collector. The upward air pressure created by the blade now is most likely to hit the top of the deck and then push back down towards the grass, thus somewhat cancelling out the lifting pressure that we had before. So in a nutshell, if the grass is wet, then it's probably best to wait a few days until the weather hopefully dries up and allows you to get a better cut on your lawn. So the next reason I would say is when we're trying to cut grass that is just too long. And so all this really means is that there's too much grass physically in front of the blade. So there's too much grass there for the turning force of the blade to physically go through efficiently. Because it can't get through, this slows down the blade. If it's the type of lawnmower with a direct shaft from the engine to the blade, then it's going to overload the engine as well and reduce the engine revs. If it's something like a ride-on mower with belts that drive the blade, then it's most likely the belts are going to get worn out and in some cases burnt out completely. But the main thing about what I'm saying is that because that blade isn't moving fast like it should do at its efficient turning rate, then again it's going to reduce that vacuum going up through the deck and the airflow to the grass collector. And because the blade has now slowed down, it's got less turning force to actually chop any grass, even to get caught up in this already reduced airflow, and so we're not going to get a very good cut at all. And what little amount of grass we do cut off will most probably start clumping. So my overall advice is that if you're going to chop long grass, put on the highest setting of the deck, make multiple cuts of the lawn, the first cut on the highest deck level setting, and go through the grass very, very slowly to give the blade time to catch up and the best chance possible of cutting through as little of the grass at one time as possible. Once you've took off the top layer with the highest setting, reduce the height and then go over the grass again. If the grass really is too long though, then it's probably best to consider using a brush cutter or a line trimmer first of all, and then go over it with the lawnmower. Okay, so that moves me on nicely to the next issue that I do see people make a mistake with, and that is mowing the grass too fast. When I say that, I mean moving the lawnmower across the lawn too fast. Now, racing across the lawn with your mower can be quite tempting sometimes, particularly if you're short of time and you want to get the job done quickly. But doing this exposes the blade to too much grass at one time, and so it overwhelms the speed and turning force of the blade, and again it slows it down somewhat. And because it's designed to turn at a certain speed for maximum vacuum and airflow through the deck to the grass box, then again reducing the speed of the blade will reduce that airflow, and now the blade doesn't have as much turning force, it's going to chop less of the grass off. So ultimately that's going to reduce the amount of grass in the collector. And the next one kind of spins off from this, and it's a little more common than you'd think, and that is not using the lawnmower at full throttle. I understand why, because it feels tempting to save fuel and reduce wear on the mower by running it at, let's say, half throttle or even 3/4 throttle rather than full throttle. But as we've been seeing, that blade is designed to turn at a certain speed, and that's at the lawnmower's maximum engine throttle. We've already seen that reducing the speed of the blade reduces the airflow through the deck and its force of chopping the grass. Therefore, we've got less grass chopped off because we've got less chopping force to go through the grass, and there's less airflow to take that grass into the grass collector, even for those pieces that have been chopped off. So again, we've got that double whammy. I always recommend that you run your lawnmower at the maximum throttle that the manufacturer has designed it to run at. Okay, so this brings me on to the last point I want to make, and that is the underside of your deck nice and clean? Because what can happen over time is that the underside of the deck can become overwhelmed with old grass being stuck to it, and it goes hard and just sits there. Because the underside of the deck is designed with the correct spacing, shape and tolerances between itself and the blade to create that vacuum up through the deck and the airflow to the grass box when it's cutting. So there needs to be the correct amount of spacing between the blade and the top of the deck, the blade and the sides of the deck, and the blade and the bottom of the deck. When there's hardened grass caked all over the bottom of the deck, that reduces these tolerances and also distorts that specially designed shape within the deck. Although it doesn't physically change the shape of the deck itself, it's taking up that space within the deck and so reduces the volume of space that the blade was designed to turn in, to create these vacuum pressures. So the result of that is less vacuum, less airflow, and we're not going to get as good a cut on the grass because we can't collect the grass properly, no matter how sharp the blade is. So the obvious tip for that is always make sure you clean the underside of the deck. We can get a scraper and scrape out the old grass, and if possible, give it a power hose wash. For a quick tip, once it's nice and clean under there, spraying it with some silicone spray will keep this area cleaner and tidier for much longer, and just be mindful of the other reasons I've mentioned and tend to them if you need to, and you'll have great cutting all year round. And if you like that video, then you might like this one, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and I'll be back soon. Thank you for watching.